Somebody in your family tree is hiding something, and most people never find out what it is. Maybe your grandmother mentioned it once at Thanksgiving, quietly, like it was a secret she almost forgot she was keeping. Maybe it has been passed down like a worn-out heirloom nobody knows the origin of anymore. A Cherokee great-great-grandmother. A princess, they always say. High cheekbones, mysterious. Gone before anyone thought to ask questions. Here is what nobody tells you. Millions of American families have this exact same story. Word for word. Almost always Cherokee. Almost always a woman. Almost always a princess. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And patterns always have explanations that most people never bother to look for. By the end of this video, you will understand why this story exists and where it really came from. You will know what the science actually says. And if you carry this tale, you will finally know the truth. Whether your story is myth or something real, do not skip ahead, because the answer is not what you think. Let us start with the thing that should bother everybody. Why Cherokee specifically? Not Sioux, not Navajo, not Apache, not Comanche, Cherokee. Always Cherokee. Have you ever stopped to ask why? Across millions of American families, mostly Southern, mostly white, the story follows the same pattern every single time. Same tribe, same gender, same royal title that historians confirm did not actually exist in Cherokee society. A historian named Gregory Smithers started pulling on this thread. What he found rewired how we understand Southern identity. Go back to the 1840s and 1850s, the South is fracturing. The federal government feels like an occupying force. White Southern families start doing something unusual during this period. They start claiming Cherokee blood out of nowhere, not because it was fashionable, because it was strategic. This was a calculated move rooted in identity and power. Think about what that claim communicated. My family was here before yours. We intermarried with the people who owned this land. We are not newcomers. We belong here, and we will resist outsiders just like the Cherokee resisted them. It was not ancestry. It was a political identity weapon used during one of America's most volatile periods. But for that weapon to work, people had to believe intermarriage actually happened. And the uncomfortable truth is this: sometimes it did. And that changes everything about how we understand these family stories passed down through generations. Before we go further, you need to understand who the Cherokee actually were. Most people claiming the Ancestry have no idea. Forget the Hollywood image completely. The reality is far more impressive than anything the movies ever showed you. Archaeological excavations at sites like Coweta Creek in North Carolina reveal something that genuinely surprises most people today. Platform mounds, sophisticated townhouses, organized communities going back thousands of years before a single European ship arrived on this continent. These were not nomadic wanderers following herds across open plains. These were builders, farmers, diplomats, strategists, community makers. They farmed the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. A planting system so effective it sustained entire civilizations for centuries. When Hernando de Soto's expedition crashed through Cherokee territory in 1540, they did not encounter scattered tribes hiding in forests. They encountered towns, organized, populated, politically sophisticated towns that had been thriving long before Europe knew this land existed. By the 1700s, the Cherokee had done something remarkable. They did not just survive European contact. They adapted without surrendering. They absorbed European technology, maintained their culture, and stayed politically powerful in ways that forced other nations to take them seriously. Then came the early 1800s, and something happened that stunned the entire world and still impresses linguists today. A man named Sequoyah, with no formal education, invented a complete writing system for the Cherokee language entirely on his own. 86 characters, 12 years of work, in a language that had never once been written down before that moment. Within months of its completion, the majority of the Cherokee nation had become literate. Think about how extraordinary that is. They built newspapers, a constitution, a Supreme Court. These were not people on the fringes of history. They were players in it, which is exactly why what happened next was so catastrophic and why the stories that followed lasted for 2 centuries. Now, here is the part your family story might actually be rooted in, even if the details got scrambled over generations. Intermarriage between Cherokee and Europeans happened. It was real. It was documented. And it was not primarily about romance. It was about economics, pure and calculated economics in a world where the right alliance could determine everything about your survival. Cherokee society was matrilineal. Clan membership, property rights, and social status all passed through the mother's line. Always the mother. A child born to a Cherokee woman was Cherokee, full stop. The father's background was irrelevant to their tribal identity. European traders, mostly Scots-Irish and Englishmen, deep in the deerskin trade, figured this out remarkably fast. Marrying into a Cherokee family was not just romantic. It meant access to trade networks that could make you extraordinarily wealthy. It meant protection in dangerous territory. It meant land rights in a colonial world where land was the only thing that mattered. Cherokee women in these marriages often held the real power. They owned the property. They determined the children's tribal status. These were not women disappearing quietly into white society. In many cases, white men were the ones disappearing into theirs. The Cherokee were more documented in these unions than almost any other tribe for several very specific and traceable reasons. Their location in the southeast overlapping with early settlements, their political sophistication, their extensive engagement with Euro-American institutions and governance. These mixed families produced real descendants. Some stayed connected to the nation. Some drifted east and assimilated across generations. Some passed as white when removal pressure mounted and survival demanded that they leave their identity behind to stay alive. And then came 1838. This is the moment that explains almost everything about why these family stories exist at all. The Trail of Tears. 1838 to 1839. One of the most devastating forced relocations in the history of this continent. President Andrew Jackson defied a Supreme Court ruling that sided with the Cherokee and forced their removal from ancestral homelands. Thousands were marched to Indian Territory in what is now Oklahoma. Thousands died on that march, of cold, of disease, of starvation, but not everyone went. Some hid in the mountains of North Carolina. They became the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. They are still there today, on that same land. That survival matters more than most people realize when they hear this story. Others had already intermarried and dispersed eastward, their children's identities blurring across decades of survival and deliberate concealment. And here is where the stories start. Families with real mixed ancestry suddenly had every reason to hide it or lose it. A Cherokee grandmother who survived by passing as white. A grandfather whose tribal connection was never spoken of because speaking was dangerous. Real history, real people, real reasons for silence that echoed down through families for 5 and 6 generations afterward. The problem is what happened to those stories afterward, because oral history is powerful, but oral history is also fragile. A great-grandmother from Cherokee County becomes Cherokee. A term of endearment gets retranslated until it sounds like royalty across generations. A mixed-race ancestor who passed as white becomes, 3 generations later, a mysterious princess with high cheekbones nobody can explain. Cherokee society had no hereditary royalty, no princesses. The title simply did not exist in their actual cultural structure. Historians like Joel W. Martin have documented just how staggeringly common this specific story is among Southern families and why. The Cherokee Princess narrative let people claim indigenous authenticity and romantic frontier heritage without any of the lived reality of being indigenous. It was a way to belong to the land without belonging to its suffering, a borrowed identity with no borrowed burden. The story exploded in the 20th century alongside vanishing Indian narratives in Hollywood, novels, and popular culture that romanticized indigenous people, portrayed as noble, tragic, and crucially gone, safe to admire, safe to claim, safe to wear like a badge of honor. In the 2010 census, nearly 1 million Americans identified as having Cherokee ancestry. That number is extraordinary when you compare it to reality. The 3 federally recognized Cherokee tribes have roughly 300,000 enrolled members combined. That gap between claimed and documented is the myth itself. So you spit in a tube, you send it to Ancestry, DNA, or 23andMe, you wait weeks for your results to arrive, and the results come back saying 0% Native American. Does that mean your entire family story is a lie? Not necessarily. If your Cherokee ancestor was 5, 6, or 7 generations back, the DNA math works completely against you from the start. Each generation you go back, your share of any one ancestor's DNA roughly halves. The numbers disappear faster than most people expect. At 6 generations back, you might carry less than 2% of that ancestor's DNA, easily below any detection threshold. The reference populations these companies use for Native American ancestry are also limited in ways that affect accuracy significantly. Algorithms struggle with tribal-specific distinctions in ways that even the companies themselves acknowledge when pressed on the question directly. Some people with fully documented Cherokee lineage in paper records still show 0 native markers on consumer DNA tests. Here is the harder truth, though. Even if your test came back positive, DNA does not make you Cherokee. Not legally, not tribally. Tribal citizenship is determined by sovereign nations, not by algorithms, not by percentages on a colorful ancestry pie chart. The Cherokee Nation, the Eastern Band, and the United Kituwa Band each have enrollment processes based on documented roles and descent. Primarily, the Dawes rolls, compiled after removal, which recorded tribal members in Indian Territory, with names, relationships, and blood quantum. If your ancestor is not on those rolls, or the Guion-Miller roll for Eastern Cherokee, DNA alone will not help you, and this matters deeply, because this is where the personal story stops being personal and starts carrying real weight for real people. A researcher named Circe Sturm spent years studying something she calls race shifting. White Americans adopting Cherokee identity they cannot verify. Her conclusion was uncomfortable but important. Many are filling a genuine void, a feeling of rootlessness in a country without deep memory. Indigenous identity offers exactly what modern American life often lacks: community, connection to land, a story that goes further back than anyone else's. The problem is that false claims carry real costs for people who are actually Cherokee and living that reality every day. When unrecognized Cherokee heritage groups lobby for recognition, it dilutes the political weight of sovereign tribal nations in ways that matter. When people claim Cherokee identity for personal benefit, it undermines communities that fought for those resources under genuine and documented historical trauma. The Cherokee people did not vanish into your family tree. They are still here, still fighting, still very much present and sovereign, still defending land rights in courts, still reviving their language, still navigating health disparities that your family story does not share. Claiming the ancestry without the accountability is not honoring them. It is borrowing their identity and leaving the cost with them. But here is the thing. Some of you watching this actually do have real connections, and you deserve to know how to find them. Start with paper, not DNA. Paper is where real ancestry either proves itself or quietly disappears into the gaps of history. The Dawes rolls are searchable online. The Guion Miller roll for Eastern Cherokee claimants is available through the National Archives right now. Census records from the mid-1800s onward, church records, land deeds, and wills are where real hidden ancestry tends to surface. Look for a great-great-grandparent who appears in one census and then completely vanishes from the next one without explanation. Look for names that do not fit the expected European pattern of your family line. Gaps in records mean someone was hiding. Look for land records in areas of Cherokee territory overlap in the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, and surrounding southeastern states. DNA can supplement your paper research. Autosomal tests detect recent admixture. Y-DNA traces the direct paternal line back through generations. Mitochondrial DNA traces the direct maternal line specifically, which matters for Cherokee ancestry given their matrilineal cultural and social structure. But go in with clear eyes. Many families who chase this story find something they did not expect waiting for them. Richer European roots than they ever knew about, or connections to other ancestries they had never once considered or been told about. An olive complexion that traces to Mediterranean ancestry, not indigenous. High cheekbones that turn out to be Scots-Irish after all. That is not a disappointment. That is your actual story. And your actual story is worth knowing just as much as any myth. Here is what all of this really tells us when you step back and look at the full picture honestly. The Cherokee Princess story is not just a family myth floating harmlessly through dinner table conversations across the American South. It is a mirror, reflecting what Americans have always longed for. Roots deeper than immigration, connection to land, a history that feels earned. It reflects the brutal complexity of colonial contact, where real intermarriage and real survival stories got stretched into legend across generations. It reflects the ongoing tension between the country America tells itself it is and the history it actually has underneath the story. Some of you have a real Cherokee ancestor somewhere in those branches. The paper trail is there if you are willing to dig. Most of you have something just as valuable. A story that reveals how your family made sense of America and survived it. Either way, you now know what the story actually means, and that changes how you carry it from this moment forward. The Cherokee are still here. Their language is being taught to children right now. Their sovereignty is still being defended in courts today. Their history does not belong to anyone's family mythology. It belongs to them. The least we can do is get it right. If this changed how you see your family's story, share it with the person who first told it to you.